3, 2, 1, go. You're listening to The Kyle Chambers Show.
And welcome to The Kyle Chambers Show. My name is Kyle Chambers. I'm here today with Connie Smith. Connie has been involved in media and journalism for over 40 years, and she currently is a public speaker and a professor at Mohawk College, and she helps people in the media doing mentorship. Thank you so much for joining the show today.
My pleasure, Kyle. Nice to be here.
What originally got you interested in doing journalism and media when you started in radio?
Wow. Well, it really goes back to when I was a little girl in school and I got involved in public speaking. And then in high school, I was involved in theater. So I was always interested in performing and acting. And in my final year, another fellow and I hosted the morning announcements. And I was quite taken with the idea of the microphone and the intimacy of radio. At the same time, I was aiming to be a high school English teacher. So I thought between high school English teaching and acting, maybe broadcasting was a nice compromise between the two because you're teaching, you're entertaining at the same time. And so that got me on my way. But as you said, I did begin in radio.
Who was your favorite broadcaster to listen to when you were growing up?
Oh, CKOC, where the hits just keep on coming. Yes, that really got me interested in that whole idea in my latter years of high school when I was doing my announcements anyway. And I ended up working there part-time while I was at Mohawk College studying journalism, and had a great time. I worked the night shift. I helped all the DJs. I wrote the news from 7 until midnight, and then I take them in, the newscasts, into the DJs to read them, and also scrounge around for elastics for their ponytails because they all had long hair and their hair would fall in front of them when they're trying to read the newscast. So that really got me interested in radio and journalism. And I covered Burlington Council, did some stories for them as well. So that really piqued my interest.
You're one of the first women to anchor on CHCH. What was it like to be able to work there, and what's your most memorable moment while working at that station?
Wow. To begin with, I didn't like the whole idea of TV. I didn't like the idea of lights and cameras and having to worry about how you looked. And I liked the intimacy of radio. But I ended up getting a job up in Barrie at CKOC TV because my teacher at the time at Mohawk says, take the job. I did eventually graduate a few years later through correspondence. Anyway, CHCH, I spent over 30 years there, 32 years there, and I did everything. I did weather, I did entertainment, I covered civic affairs, I covered national conventions and political conventions, and I basically grew up and spent most of my adult life on the air at CHCH TV.
That's great. I did a course, actually, it was part of Haldeman County. It was kind of a general course, and you talked about how to present yourself and things you can do to help yourself and be able to cover things in the local news and media. So it's great able to do that because of your experiences on different stations throughout the years.
Absolutely. And local news is more important than ever. So I think the more we support our local newspapers, our local stations, even our local online news services, the better off we will be as people lucky enough to live in this democracy.
Yes, I do think that being able to be informed, being able to make your own decisions, and having good things and reliable sources to be able to figure out what the truth is, and then also people looking to those reliable sources to actually see what the truth is and what they need to do going forward is very important.
Credibility is everything right now, as you know, Kyle, and as you learned at Mohawk as well. And the ability to search out credible sources is essential and something that should be learned at the public school level, I believe.
How do you manage being a public speaker while also teaching in media at Mohawk College?
Well, I always taught part-time or partial load, and I was just able to plan around that. When I worked an 11 to 7 shift at CHCH, I had an early morning class at like 8 or 8:30 in the morning, introduction to on-camera work. And I was just able to juggle the time. And of course, time management is more important than ever before because there's so much multitasking involved in journalism these days: video, audio, writing, and deadlines every hour, and even more so. So time management is so important. And I was just able to do that. And somehow it all worked. And right up until last year, I've been teaching part-time at Mohawk, and I'm not sure what's happening in the future for journalism at Mohawk College. It's tough right now because the course has changed so much, and it's hard to keep up with the changing industry. So I'm actually up in the air about what the future is right now. Maybe you can help me there.
That'd be pretty neat. I do think that with podcasting, journalism, and we're even seeing radio now because I just graduated from broadcasting, radio, and creative content with Mohawk. The program shifted from just radio to the podcasting and creative content side, which I learned about when the program was relaunched back in September of 2022. They relaunched it. So I think journalism will go down a similar path. I don't know much about the program to actually have concrete information, but I think that's the way media is going. How did it feel to be inducted into the Order of Ontario?
That probably was one of the proudest days of my life. My husband, my son, my mother and father were with me in a limousine that drove us right to Queen's Park, inducted by the incredible David Onley, the former Lieutenant Governor, who I'd interviewed a number of times. So it was very much an honor to be there. And I'm grateful for the opportunities that allowed me to do all the positive news stories, the volunteer work, helping to really bring communities together, for which I believe I was nominated by a good friend and former classmate of mine from Mohawk College, Jim Slomka.
Is there one news story that you covered in your 40 years that really stood out to you, that really impacted you for the rest of your career?
So many. 9/11, probably, when it comes to the most terrifying, serious, potentially world-altering story. I was on the air for 8 hours. I walked in. I was doing the noon show at the time, and 6 o'clock, and I walked into the assignment editor to see what was going on around 10:30 or so, and they said, well, we don't know what's going on, but it looks like a plane has crashed into a building in Toronto, or Toronto and New York City. And at first we thought it was maybe a traffic helicopter or something. But as soon as the second plane went in, we knew it was big and likely terrorism. In terms of being on the air and having no idea how that actual story was going to end, it was pretty terrifying. And just the adrenaline required to stay on. And when you have multiple information coming into my ear from multiple sources, it was quite a test for live broadcasting. So that stayed with me forever and will stay with me forever. In terms of the most heart-wrenching and satisfying stories, it had to do with a little girl who desperately needed a heart transplant. And we followed her story, and a few months later, her condition was deteriorating, and we were really, really worried. And finally, the news director said, well, you know what? We got to start putting together an obit. We've got to look forward and be prepared. And as you know, in journalism, that's something that has to be done for public figures or people involved in major stories. And I was about to tackle it, and my phone rang one day in the newsroom. It was a very big open concept newsroom, and a very faint voice at the end of the phone said, hi, Connie. I could hardly hear him. His voice was so faint, but he said, it's Ashley's father. And I was thinking the worst. Oh my God. He said, I want to thank you because there's a new heart beating in my daughter's chest right now. Well, I just shouted out to the whole newsroom, it's Ashley, she got her heart. And we were all in tears. We were so grateful and happy for her. And she lived well into adult life. Sadly, I received the news a few years ago that she did pass away. But those stories of survival really got me on the road to the power of positivity and the stories that connect most with viewers, listeners, and readers, the stories that inspire and empower, like that one that we followed for so long.
How did something like that influence the future of what you did with your good news brand in the media, as well as something as you did on the side?
I realized, and after I left CH, I took a look at the news that was on the air, and I went, oh my goodness, we're all in a communal depression. We need more hope. We need more inspiration. And it doesn't mean we ignore the bad news, the sad news. But it means we have to focus on who's doing something to make it better, to move the narrative along, and to inspire hope. And maybe other people will say, oh, wow, they're doing something to make a difference. Maybe I can too. We need more good news. So that show was groundbreaking. It was the first and only entirely good news show. We had correspondents overseas through Crossroads Television, interviewed celebrities who wanted to come and talk because they weren't going to be skewered or cross-examined. It was a story about people who give back.
Thank you so much for joining the show today.
Happy to be here, Kyle. And I've learned a lot by the streaming system, so thank you for that.